We're starting now, and we're going to start off today. We have Mike Honeger and the Need to Know, and Benjamin Dimmitt, an Unflinching Look Elegy for Wetlands. We're going to start with Mike because Benjamin is going to do a little different format than usual. But we'll start with Mike, and we'll pass it off to him now.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to the Southeast Center of Photography and you, Michael and Polly and Benjamin. It's nice to connect with you. I'm here to basically talk about my book, The Need to Know, which I'm going to be showing you, and also which deals with my father's work as a spy during the Cold War in West Germany, as he worked for the Air Force. And as he worked for the US Air Force, and basically, since he was fluent in German, he sent agents into East Germany and to other parts of the former Soviet Union. And to sort of walk you through a little bit about the book, I'm going to share my screen and actually demonstrate the book. This is the cover and a picture of my father from one of his passports. And this was the early 60s in Germany, in West Germany, when Germany was still divided. And we were stationed, the whole family was transferred to Germany when I was 10 years old when we first got there. And I had been born in Germany in the late 40s when my father was there on his first tour. And then we moved there in 1959 as a family. And it was, still right after the period. I mean, there were still remnants of World War II. I remember a lot of bombed houses when I was growing up. And in fact, I played in a lot of German bunkers where I would find all sorts of interesting paraphernalia. But to get into the book itself, the one thing about the name of the book, The Need to Know, was that whenever I asked any kind of questions about what my father did, as children, we were all given the same rather stoic response that, do you have the need to know? And that usually just stifled any kind of conversation. And we learned that you just don't inquire about what he did. But there were always strange signs. We would go on weekend trips. There was always a Sunday outing, and we would wind up at what I forgot to mention is we were stationed at a point in Germany, Kassel, which was only 35 kilometers from the eastern border, and which made it rather convenient for my father's work in retrospect, but it also made it interesting for us as children to, we played in the forests of Germany and rode our bicycles and did all those enjoyable things, including swimming there was a base nearby, and at the base there was a swimming pool, and it was only in doing research for the book that I discovered that under this swimming pool there was a battery of missiles aimed at the Soviet Union, and it made. At the time, I had no idea, but in retrospect, it was a wee bit chilling. The book itself took me about 4 years to work. I worked on it for 4 years, and it involved a lot of research because Of course, I didn't know exactly what my father did. I did many Freedom of Information Act requests. And it was only in delving into family archives and actually doing some of my own sleuthing that I figured out, and also talking to my family members who were still alive. So the cover also is significant in that, if you can, I don't know if you can make it out on your screens, but to the left of my father's picture, basically southwest of my father's picture, there's some coding that is all part of this actual coding that I found in his files when I went through them. I'm going to go through the book a little bit. There aren't that many. It's not the entire book, but this will give you a flavor. Some of these photos were taken by me and my father in 1961. And when we get to them, I'll explain how that all transpired, because we were there at different points, particularly in Berlin, in West Berlin, shooting into East Berlin. But this, for example, is one of the offices of the Stasi, the East German secret police headquarters in Berlin, in East Berlin. And I was just stunned by the simplicity of, and this was probably very realistic in terms of how the offices of the secret police worked. It was very basic, but they were probably the most clever secret police operating in Europe at the time. This is in the book, one of the design features of the book, and I give great credit to Aneta Kovacic, who was the designer that I worked with on the book. But she came, I asked her to make it mysterious, to make sure that there were a lot of mysterious elements in the book. One of them is a fold out of the day the wall went up. This is the East German daily, Neues Deutschland. And this is the actual day after the wall went up, how they reported it. So unless you're really good in German, it'll be a little complicated, but the entire thing folds out in the book. We were also, as I mentioned, 35 kilometers from the border, and we weren't allowed to obviously go near it. Even my father could not cross into the east for fear of being arrested. And I also researched whether there were any files of his work in the East German Stasi records when they became public. And I wrote to them and discovered that all of anything relating to a foreign agent or foreign espionage had been the first thing the Stasi destroyed when the regime collapsed. So I was not able to find much of anything. The only thing that they didn't destroy were the records of who they were spying on internally in East Germany. Throughout the book, there are two sections where these are the tools of the spy trade. I was really lucky to be able to go to Berlin, and I had access to the Berlin Spy Museum's archives. And I was thrilled when they allowed me to photograph about 50 different tools used by all of the different spy agencies. This was an American version of a keychain that had a camera. And in the book, there are about 8 different tools that are embedded in the text. Now, this is one of the photos my father took when he was there in 1961 of East Germany, shooting into East Germany. And I found these by sheer chance in a slide carousel at my mother's house that nobody had looked at for many years. hence the degradation of the photo. But it was really interesting because my sister and I had also traveled to Berlin to visit a family friend in 1961, right after the wall went up. And I also photographed, and you'll see some of those in the book. They're the small square photos. This is just this is a composite I did of sort of what we lived under as a family. The constant during the Cold War, during that period, it was a very intense period of political tension, and we were very close to the action, if you would. So these are some of my father's colleagues, and passport of another of my father's passports, which opens up in the book. It's an amazing replica that Annetta pulled together. Another tool of the trade. This was another American flashlight that was a camera. Now this is in the book. There are two secret areas where this was an actual coding sheet used by my father from it's called a one-time pad coding device or technique. And there are two hidden codes in the book that some people have said, oh, they forgot to cut the pages of the book, but actually they are meant not to be cut. And they are hiding codes. The other code sheet was actually handwritten by my father. And the one-time pad is just that. It can only be used once. I've tried to get this decoded, but once you lose the pad, it's impossible. And here you can see, this is my father's office, his office mates, fellow agents. And these are the tools of the trade that are kind of within the book. This was a border area right near where we lived, and these are Russian border guards. This was not taken by me at the time. This was a photo of a photo, actually. Now here's one of the photos I took in 1961 of the wall, and it was right after a snowstorm. This is a sort of before and after shot where it says in the small image, es gibt nur ein Berlin, there is only one Berlin. And it was a very powerful theme during the dividing of Berlin. And the other image in color is the wall today, or relatively recently. This is an important U-Bahn or metro stop in Berlin, famous or infamous because of this is where the Stasi, the secret police headquarters were. And if you got off at this station, it usually meant you were in trouble of some sort because it wasn't a place to go to visit. It is now, it's a museum now, but another tool of the trade, a very famous camera, tiny little camera. Now, my mother also, everybody went to Berlin at different times. And my mother went with some friends to visit a German friend of ours who's on the left. My mother is standing next to her, the taller one. And this was the week before the wall went up. And she took what is called the duty train, a military train. It's how we all got to Berlin. A military train that only went at night, and all the windows were sealed, so you couldn't see anything, including I peeked, I have to confess, when I went and looked out, and you could see the Russian soldiers in their garb, in winter garb, because I went in the winter. My mother went in the summer, and This is another shot my father took of East Berlin, shooting from the west. And this is a family photo this is me doing my homework, but the significance of the photo is that the radio behind me, there are a number of stories in the book, simple stories at the back of the book. And this is the radio where my father took down the codes that came over the radio. And I discovered this photo by sheer chance after I found the codes. But I remembered walking in on him one night while he was taking down the codes and translating. And this is a shot of the book where the code, that is the actual coding that he did, that he took down. And these are more photos I took in 1961 of looking into after the wall went up. And the thing that I really wanted to also emphasize was the impact all of this had on our family, which, you know, people say you didn't know what your father did. And I mean, we knew, but we didn't know specifically anything specific. I mean, people would show up at our apartment and spend the night, always Germans. And, you know, my father would speak with them. And if we ever asked them, you know, who was that masked man? Basically, we got the response I mentioned earlier. You have the need to know. But he was a wonderful family man. We had wonderful adventures. This was one of them in Switzerland. Another tool of the trade. This was used by the Stasi, and it was a woman's purse. There was also a man's purse that had a hidden camera in it. Just another image. This is one of my images of the wall, back when there was more of it. And this is probably the most interesting of the tools of the trade. This was an insidious tool, I thought, used by the Stasi, the secret police, at funerals of dissidents. What they would do is they'd have one of their people dressed as a gardener at the plot next to where the dissident was being buried. And there's a camera where the arrow is in here. There's a camera in there, and they would photograph the mourners because they figured the mourners were also dissidents. So it was, I thought, pretty sick. But and this is called a leporello, which I had never heard of, but Annetta cleverly designed this so that it had certain images from the book and the vignettes that I wrote about different stories that happened while we were living there, little vignettes of life, daily life. So, and again, my father was we often vacationed in Italy in the 60s, in the early 60s. And this was one of those vacation shots. But anyway, I think I'm just about out of time, Michael. And should we open it up to a few questions?
Sure. Thanks, Mike. That was great. Anybody have any questions for Michael? Kathleen?
Oh, hi, Michael. This is Don. I was wondering, so apparently you managed to come across some of the codes. Have they ever been translated? Do you know what they say?
No, I tried. In fact, there's a website that where they're coding fanatics. And I thought, well, I'll give it a try. And I tossed it out to the group. And they said, oh, it's from And they knew instantly, it's from a one-time pad. Nobody can break that code. I mean, you know, you needed the one-time pad to actually
One time, what, Michael?
Pad.
Pad.
pad. Yeah.
So they would change the codes. I see. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
and once the pad was used, you used it once, and the agent had the pad, and my father had the pad, and once it was used, you know, the code was finished.
I see.
So it was kind of interesting. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry, Kathleen.
No, Michael, I just, since we have it right now, was there anything that you learned about your father that either you were disappointed in or surprised in or proud of as you did all your research?
Oh, I found out a lot that I was proud of. You know, in fact, one of the medals he won was in the book, and one of the citations. He had a very interesting career because he spoke fluent German. He was the liaison to the German FBI. So this was in a later iteration, but he was involved in the capture of the Baader Meinhof gang, which was the Red Rudy and that whole wave of terror that was happening in Europe this was 10 years later in the early 70s, around the time of the murders in Munich and all that. So no, it was, the more I got into it, as someone, one of my relatives said a few weeks ago, your father is looking down and smiling with great pride. So I think it's been quite a joy, and what I found was nothing but good. I mean, I didn't find anything negative. So
Michael, thank you. It's a treasure.
thanks, Corey.
Lisa? You're muted.
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much.
Hi, Lisa.
Is this sort of I'm just interested in your interest in photography, and does it stem from the photos that you took back then? Have you always carried a camera around with you, or was it sort of looking back now I would just tell me about the origins of your interest in photography.
Well, no, actually, I think some of those early pictures, when they were rediscovered because my sister had them, and I had not seen them in 50 years. So
Oh, wow.
it was quite a treat when she suddenly handed me this folder, and they tumbled out. And no, I was thrilled because I remembered I had this little brownie star flash that I did carry around with me a lot when I was a kid. And, you know, quite frankly, don't have any of these were the only photos that I remember having from that era. So, but, you know, I've always been interested. My father was a good photographer, and I've always had an interest as well. But I didn't get serious about it until I retired. So, and then I jumped in with both feet, and anyway, continue to do so.
Yeah. Well, thank you. We love our copy of the book.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Can I
And
ask a question,
Yeah.
Michael?
Sure, Jory. Hi.
Hi, you. Good to see your face.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here talking about the book. I wondered, people come to the idea of doing a book, and then a lot of people have ideas of doing a book, but they don't ever get there to do the book, right? And how did that kind of unfold for you from thinking about it in your head to it being an actual thing that you did? And what was that process like for you in doing this book?
Well, it's a great question, and I have one of the people who did an essay in the book to thank for it. I was at a workshop up in Maine, at Main Media, and with Aline Smithson. And I was being introduced by another photographer to the group. It was the first day, and I was introduced. And I had mentioned, it was one of these one-on-one interviews where you tell your life story in 3 minutes and you're presented to the whole group. And she did that. The person who interviewed me, what she was most impressed with was that my father was a spy. And Aline jumped all over that. And she said, Michael, you know, have you ever thought about doing a book about that? And she proceeded to bombard me with interesting books of a similar nature. And she planted the seed, and then I started doing the research. But that was the great motivator. I thought, of course, how have I ignored this for so long? So so that was the origin, and then it just rolled from there. And of course, COVID hit, which was a bit of a snag, but that was I was able to do some research during that period. So
can I ask one
But-
more question?
Whoa, I've got my hand up.
Oh, sorry. Okay, go
Hi,
ahead.
Michael, Judith, greetings from our Return Peace Corps volunteers. I love your
you.
book. Thank you so much. It's terrific. It's a treasure.
Thank you.
And I
Thank you.
wondered if you ever talked to your dad about it or any of his colleagues about it way later. Was it possible, or was it still all frozen and terrible? And
No, I actually had a wonderful, that's actually where some of the stories in the book come from.
okay.
I was able to talk to him after he retired. He didn't, unfortunately, he had a massive stroke soon afterwards. So, and he survived the stroke, but he wasn't, I mean, his memory was pretty much shot after that. But we had a couple of conversations where I asked specific questions about some of the incidents that occurred. And I was very grateful for that, for having had that opportunity. So yes.
Michael?
Hi, David.
Hi, how are you,
Hi,
Michael?
Brenda.
Lovely, great book, and thank you very much. I was just curious, before your dad had his stroke, I assume the wall had come down then and the Stasi files had been opened. What sort of reaction might he have had to that, if I have the timeline right?
Actually, he had the stroke the year before the wall came down.
Okay.
So in fact, he was at his worst at that point.
Okay.
So I don't even think it would have registered. So
Yes.
sadly.
Mhm.
But
Okay,
Yeah.
Ruth, you're muted. There you
Okay,
go.
sorry. Michael, my question's about photography because
Mhm.
I was very struck by the exhibition that you had in Nice, Songs of Myself, where you portrayed yourself in a number of different scenarii. And I wondered if it was part of this exploration that you've been conducting now for at least 3 or 4 years, looking back on your life. And I wondered, what is the impact going to be in terms of the photography that you're doing going forward?
oh, that's a very good question. You're going to find out very shortly. Ruth was the host of my show. Ruth and Mark, her husband, hosted my show, so at their gallery. But no, this book has made me realize how much of self-portraiture. It's not just self-portraiture; it is looking at my life and the different parts. And
Mhm.
and I'm moving into another portraiture phase, but I'm not sure exactly yet because it hasn't evolved in the inspirational way that I know it will evolve. But it's percolating. Let me put it that way.
Well,
And-
we'll
and
be forward. Yeah,
Thank you, thank you,
yeah. Great book. Thank you.
thank you.
Lisa?
Oh, hi, Michael. First of all, I love the book. It's inspiring for somebody who'd love to like to do an artist book, and I'm going to have to go scurrying through it to look for little Easter eggs or whatever they're called to see if there's more hidden in it. In the process of designing the book, what were your sort of trade-offs about making things explicit and leaving them ambiguous, if that's the right way of putting it, because there is there's an enigmatic quality to it, which makes me want to go back through the whole thing again now.
Well,
How did you
Jim,
do that?
Well, Jim, that was my primary intent with the book, because of the title says it all. I also wanted the viewer to come away with the need to know that all the questions weren't going to be answered, and because they weren't answered for me, and take that, they're not going to be answered for you either. No, I've had a lot. I've had a number of people get frustrated with the book because of that, but that was the intent. So,
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay. Brendan?
Congratulations, Mike, on your book. This is a fascinating story. I had two uncles who were also CIA spies, one based in New York, one based in Havana during World War II. And I wondered which agencies you found cooperative when you submitted your Freedom of Information Act requests.
none. That was an easy one, Brendan. No, I mean, I got nothing from the Freedom of Information. They kept saying, we can't help you, we can't help you. And I don't know why. I mean, it was over 50 years, so it can't be that secret. But
thanks, and congratulations again.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Abe?
Hi, Michael. Thanks very much. This was really great. We're related, but I wanted to ask. You focus mostly on the Cold War period. Are there a few things you could tell us about what your father and actually your mother did during World War II?
Well, during World War II, actually, it was after the war that he did the most. He was interviewing Russian prisoners of war around the time I was born, which would have been 49, 50. And they were interviewing. He was interviewing to get, to be honest, I don't know. My mother just told me that he spent most of his time, because he spoke German, he was interviewing Russians who spoke German and had been in Germany for prolonged periods. So, but, and my mother worked at the Pentagon, worked in Eisenhower's office. And that's about all I've ever been told. So I guess I have the need to know that too. So what, Judy?
Michael, I wanted to ask you, because I remember very clearly that your father went to Vietnam also.
That's correct. And Korea.
And are you planning to maybe write another book about that? Or can you tell us a few things about what he did and why he was there?
Well, he was still in the same organization, and so he was probably. I don't know what he did in Vietnam. I know he was there during Tan Son Nhut and the attack on Tan Son Nhut Air Base. He was. He got medals in Vietnam and Korea that we have. So I mean, he seemed to
Continue.
but yeah, I just don't know what he did.
Yeah.
I was in
Yeah,
by then
it's
I was in
amazing.
college. Yeah.
Yeah, he was just Uncle Frank to me.
Thank you, Judy.
Okay, we're going to wrap it up with Mike. But before we
Okay.
go, where can we find the Need to Know?
You can purchase the book at the Blow Up either through my website, and my name is spelled with one N and two G's, just to clarify the announcement. No worries there, Michael. Or you can go to blowuppress.eu and get a copy directly from them. And I know they'd be thrilled if you bought one. So, but many of you have, because I see the books everywhere. So. But thank you all. I appreciate it. Thank you, Michael, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, we're going to pass it off now to something a little different with Benjamin Dimmitt and Polly Gayard. So I'm going to go ahead and just let them roll.
Hi, I'm Polly Gayard, and I'm the program director for Photos at Critical Mass. And Benjamin asked me here today to talk with him about his project. I interviewed him many years ago for, you had not started the book yet, right, Benjamin, at that point?
At that point, I had the beginning, yes, I had
Okay,
started.
you had, all right. But so we're kind of following up today, and Benjamin, I know you want to take us through the work so we can all understand what you've accomplished here. The book is An Unflinching Look, Elegy for Wetlands. And go ahead when you're ready.
And it is published by the University of Georgia Press. And I'm going to share screen if I'm able to. And I first have to, sorry, I could have been doing this earlier. Sorry. Oh, I'm not getting it. So here's what I'll do. I will just tell you, I have a slideshow and I'll find it eventually. The subject of my project, which I have worked on for 8+ years, is the Chassahowitzka National Wildlife Refuge, which is on the Gulf Coast of Florida, about 70 miles north of Tampa. And it is a spring-fed estuary. And I started my first trip there. I'm originally from Clearwater, Florida, which is also near Tampa. And my first trip there was in 1977. And I took a couple of snapshots, but I thought it was a place I'd like to visit again. And I did several times and began a photographic project, because shooting there because it was a beautiful place. And around 2004, I began to feel that I wanted to do a project that would address what I felt were vulnerable areas in Florida, vulnerable to worsening storms, development, and this thing that I heard about in college called global warming. And lo and behold, I started that around 2004. And in 2014, I went to visit. At that point, I was living here in Asheville, North Carolina, and went down, and I discovered that in a couple of years since I had been there,
the seas had risen and the salt water, this is a spring-fed estuary, so the salt water had come in as the seas were rising and had devastated the wetlands. And I began that project in earnest and ultimately took the project to, in 2020, took the project to the University of Georgia Press. And they said, yes, we'd be very happy to publish a book of this. And here's how we do things here. And that's how this began. If you give me a second, Polly, I'm going to try and add photography to this. Yeah, I'm having failure here.
Is it the SEC 4P Zoom?
I don't believe it is, no.
Okay.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, this took me a second to find it. This is so I'm just going to get on through this then. This is the first photograph I took at the swamp, as we refer to it, in 1977. And this is in its pristine state. There is in the middle ground the remains of a trestle. 100 years ago, a lumber company built a mill on the side of the river and went in and pulled out all of the virgin cypress forests. They built train tracks into the swamp so that it would be easier for them to pull everything out and take it back to the mill. It was a really beautiful place, and this is what it looked like. This is probably in 1986 or so. It was very unlike anything I'd ever seen in America or in the world. And there really aren't very many places like this in Florida either. So, like I said, in 2004, I jumped in, literally in this case, into the water. And back at this time, I was using infrared film, so that's why this looks a little unusual. These are right toward the beginning of the when the salt water was getting in the aquifer. What had happened additionally, besides seas rising, was that there were a lot of development nearby, and the state was giving the aquifer water away to these massive developments like the villages, and also to the villages' golf courses, which consume tons of water a year. And very quickly, when you pull the water out of the aquifer, fresh water out of the aquifer, then the Gulf of Mexico starts to work its way into the aquifer. And now these creeks, again, these photographs are all 20 years old. These creeks have a lot of salt water in them, as does the aquifer. Some of these down trees are an indication that it's a lot of salt water is getting in. In order to make this more explicit, I went back into my archives around 2016 because I had an exhibit at my gallery in Tampa. And the gallery owner said, you know, can you find old photographs and reshoot them now? And I said, yeah, I know how to do that. And so the book has about 14 of these pairs. And the one on the left was taken in 2004, and the one on the right was taken in 2021. I actually have the exact dates here. Yeah, here we are. And these help me get the publisher, the University of Georgia Press, to say yes to publishing this work, because they're an academic press and it has to be good, solid science. And they felt that this was solid science, which I believe it is. And this work.
Benjamin, can you talk about your use of black and white for this project?
Sure. As you can see, what's right in front of us now is I was using black and white film all along there. And when I began to start photographing the effects of the saltwater intrusion, I didn't necessarily feel that it was important to reassess what sort of film I used. And I just continued to use the black and white film as I have for now over 50 years. I feel color is unnecessary information, and I'm much more comfortable with black and white film. And I think black and white tends to boil things down to their essential form, and that doesn't necessarily show that well in these rephotographic pairings, but I felt perfectly comfortable. I also don't know, I am much more comfortable with black and white than I am with digital. Excuse me, I'm more comfortable with analog equipment than I am with digital. So these pairings are usually 10 to 20 years apart. This is only 10 years, the same spot. The left is 2011 and on the right is 2021. And there's a few more here. This is 7 years apart. This 20 some odd years. Other questions, Polly, while I'm going?
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about how are you getting to these locations? Looks to me you've been using medium format most of the time. So is that hand holding it, or what's your setup like, and how hard is it to get to these places?
This is remote. You won't see any other civilization in the background anywhere. I learned early on in the project that the places I wanted to photograph, I would need to be in a canoe. And I'm shooting all with medium format. So that meant using high-speed 2 1/4 film. And that allowed me to shoot more from the gut. And it also would give me a negative that I could make a good size print from. The paddling around and shooting, from the canoe is one thing. I don't want to say I'm a control freak, but I like to make sure that I'm getting what I want. And doing this photograph and the ones like this one also involved me getting out of the canoe with a tripod and cable release and everything else, and standing in the water with whatever is in the water, whether it's alligators or water moccasins, and making the photograph. In this particular one, I'm stood in the water there for 20 minutes. It was very hard to compose this because it's a lot of information in this one shot. Whereas this was on a platform outside of somebody's cabin. So this was very easy, tripod. I'd take one frame and that's it.
So Benjamin, from the beginning of this project was what year?
When I decided to go ahead and make the project out of shooting the impact of the climate change, that was 2014.
Okay, so then how often did you make trips back and you weren't living in Florida at the time, so can you explain that process?
I had a gallery in Tampa, like I said, and they give me a date, so I had to make work. And that was in 2016. And I went down there a lot of times in a couple of years, but the total from 2014 through 2022 was probably about 25 trips down there. I live in Asheville, and I would go to Clearwater, and my friend owned the cabin that was in one of the diptychs earlier on, and I would meet him there, and we'd get in his beat up old boat and go up to the cabin, and I would shoot for 3 or 4 or 5 days solid and come back with a ton of film and process it. And once I got the deal with the publisher in 2020, I continued to go down there because I didn't feel I had enough work. I don't think you ever feel like you have enough work. Michael Honeger, you might know the same feeling that, yeah, I'd rather say no to something and leave it out than to think about something that I should have shot. I had put a lot of work in at the end of the period before everything was closed up and sent off to have plates made, especially following up the rephotographic diptychs, updating the after pictures.
We have a question from Mary Jo Larson, and she wants to know if you can repeat again where the wetland is exactly, and
Yeah.
is it a protected area per se?
Yes, it is. This area is between Weeki Wachee, Florida, and Crystal River. It's on the Gulf Coast, about 70 miles north of Tampa. And that coastline there are very few towns because it's all 6 inches above sea level. And the area exactly where I was shooting is a national wildlife refuge called the Chassahowitzka National Wildlife Refuge. And it was set aside in 1943 as a place for migrating birds to come down from the north and winter and enjoy the Florida climate. Ironically, I'll say this quickly, there were wood storks and other large migratory birds, whooping cranes, who would come down from the upper Midwest. And they stopped coming there about 6 or 8 years ago, and people were disappointed. So they got people in paragliders to spend a lot of time acclimating with the birds. And then the paragliders would fly down from northern Minnesota somewhere to the wildlife refuge to get the birds to continue to come down. And as it turns out, the reason they were stopping coming down to this place is because the saltwater intrusion had killed all the food that they like to eat. So it's a waste of energy and time to train them. They said, oh yeah, I remember going down there, but there's nothing to eat. And then they just stopped coming. So that's the Chassahowitzka.
Let me ask you this, Benjamin. So in terms with the drastic change of the location between when you're there for the first time, you're there for the second time, I mean, how did you know you were at the same spot the second time or the third time or whatever when you're taking the photograph? How did you map that for yourself?
A photographer would ask me that question. And I was asked that by a photography magazine. How did you know? Well, it was difficult. All of the old photographs were shot on film, of course, and all the new is shot on film. So there's no metadata. So, to geolocate. And what I did was to make prints of these old photographs and put them in Ziploc bags, because in a canoe, you're getting wet, and inside a dry box, and paddle or walk to a place that I'd shot before. And I would have a print of it and stand there and look. And often it was really depressing because if I had found the spot, I was seeing a lot of damage. And it was usually there aren't any radio towers or tall buildings there. So I would use trees to help me, an indicator tree to help me confirm that I was in the right spot. Well, what this is, one of the primary indicators of climate change is that these trees can't take the salt, and those trees were gone, the ones in the photograph. Eventually, I modernized a little bit, and I would send JPEGs of the old photographs to my phone, and then I'd stand there with my phone and try and position myself.
Wow. So, should we stop the screen sharing for a second so we can talk more, or did you have any more that you want to show us? I have another one to
I have a
ask.
few more, I think.
Oh, okay. Okay. I was gonna ask you, obviously this work is a book. There's a lot of people that have written for it. There's a lot of people that have viewed this work. What has anything come out of this project that's helpful to this kind of climate change? Have you had any positive response or any action that's been taken?
I'd have to say, besides having a book published, which is not a bad thing, because it puts me in a position where I can do what I'm doing now, which is talking about it and letting people know that this is happening. That's why we do this, is to, as they say, get the word out. I had learned, like I said, that way back in the 70s that this might happen, but I didn't know it would happen at this speed. So when I started the project in 2014 to shoot the devastation, not the pretty old pictures, I felt that it was important for me to let people know that this was actually happening, and not, that rising seas, global warming, and saltwater intrusion is now. It's not something that's going to start happening in 10 years. It's going on, and this is what it looks like. The more I can show this work, sell books, then I can spread this message. It's not something that I can exhibit because no one wants to see this on a wall. Museums don't. It's been my experience.
Well, have you ever tried to approach like Environmental Protection Agency or any sort of state agencies within Florida that maybe would take, I mean, this book is evidence of what's happening.
What happens is you work on this for all the years, you make the evidence, then you get it published, and then you become focused on, Michael, you may understand this too, then you become focused on selling the books and getting the word out that way. And I have signed with a book publicist who promises me a bigger megaphone. And I'm happy to have a bigger megaphone. One of the things that is shameful is that the increased pumping from the aquifer was approved by the state of Florida, which means that they were aware that this might happen or would happen. And there are water boards who say, sure, no problem, you guys go ahead. And it's all right. It makes me realize that the impact that the scientists knew would take place would be far enough away from people that no one would care. And it's like dumping radioactive whatever in an area and then letting people build homes on it. My assumption is it was known that this would happen, and there wasn't anyone living out there, so who cares? There people have been building homes closer and closer to the Gulf in water that floods. So they'll find out, or they are finding out. Every hurricane is finding out.
Can you talk about the act of photographing and how important it was for you to make the image aesthetically pleasing versus, this awful thing is happening in the world? Is it still important to give it an aesthetic that's pleasing to the eye?
I feel very strongly that it is, Polly. In order to get people to look at the photograph, I think it needs to be visually satisfying. And if you can go up a step from visually satisfying to something pleasing or challenging but beautiful, then I think you are engaging the audience better, or the viewer better. I really don't know how to take ugly photographs, and it's not something that I'm interested in learning. I'd rather have the challenge of making this photograph, which
Right.
is not easy from a canoe with a handheld camera. So I think it's more important to make something that's pleasing and alluring, that makes people maybe question why it's beautiful or why it's ugly, or why they might think it's ugly.
Was there ever a point in the project, because of the impact of climate change, that you felt like you didn't want to do it anymore because it was just too depressing when you're dealing with a subject like this?
It wasn't that I didn't want to do it anymore. It's that it was difficult to do. And by that, I mean difficult and that it was hard, that it was depressing. This is not something it's hard to put it in language. It's not uplifting. And since this is I'm a native Floridian, so this is my native landscape. This is a place that I felt was beautiful back in the 70s when I first saw it. It's distressing to see it look this way. That makes it exhausting over the long run because, as I said, this is 2014 through 2022. It's 8 years of going down there 25 times and looking for changes and looking for something you haven't already shot. It's rough doing it.
Well, how does it feel on this side of the project? I imagine most of this, if not all, other than maybe the book, was self-funded. And how, what gave you that sort of resilience and tenacity? Like, how did you see it forming in your mind? How did you know the outcome?
I kind of went with I don't want to say dumb, but maybe a naive viewpoint, and that is just shoot it. Just go down there and shoot it. And I have a friend whose cabin is in some of the earlier photographs, who goes there regularly. For him, it's an excuse to work on a half gallon of Jim Beam, but he's a good old boy, and those are the kind of folks that have cabins in these remote places. He loved going up there. He used me as an excuse to go and shoot. I just put my head down and kept doing it. And I found the challenges gratifying, and especially when I got the my proposal was accepted in 2020, and had the press say plenty of encouraging things and help me write. I had a great editor because they liked it. They were happy to see this unfolding, and I was shooting until the very last minute. I have a little something that I'll read. It's very short, that is in the book, and it's by a very well-known landscape photographer whose name is Emmett Gowan, who photographed in really horrible places. And I tried to understand how I was able to do this. And I recalled that I had seen an exhibit of Emmett's work, well, probably 12 years ago. And he had this at the beginning of the book, and this is in the front of my book. I got permission from him. And it's about what it's like to do what you're talking about. In a landscape photograph, both the mind and heart need to find their proper place. Before the landscape, we look for an invitation to stand without premeditation. The heart seems to withdraw and the body seems always to diminish. At such a moment, our feelings reach for an understanding. This is the gift of a landscape photograph, that the heart finds a place to stand. I can't say that. I can't say it any better than that. I made a commitment to the project, and when they told me they didn't need any more photographs, the book was ready to go to press, that's when I stopped.
Can you turn off the screen share? I was going to ask you one more question, and then if anybody else wanted to jump in at that point. So my question for you, if you don't mind talking about your process of the book proposal, putting the book proposal together, how you identified the publisher, and how many publishers, what length of time. Publishing a book is not quick. I do know that. So just a little bit about that process.
I think that I would qualify as someone who was lucky, but I have to also say maybe it's the book. I was told by a friend who was working on his second book with the University of Georgia Press that I should submit it to them. And he gave me the name of the director and said that she was expecting me to reach out. So I didn't know what to do. I'm just a photographer. So I sent her a link to the work on my website, which is not what you're supposed to do. And she wrote back and said, yeah, okay, but we have some other things to discuss. And I said, okay, what now? And there were lots of things to discuss, but at first, every press, especially an academic one, is going to have a different process or procedure for their proposal. And I needed to identify potential contributing writers. My book has 4 writers besides me. And what would they write about? It's an academic press, so it needs to have, it needs to be valid and provable. I have an environmental writer, a scientist who studied this exact place, a native Floridian who studied this, an essayist, museum essayist, and a native Floridian who ran the Duke Center for Documentary Studies. This is what we settled on, and a lot of it had to do with for me, looking back at the process, with being assigned a good editor. But it's a very long process with that. Before I was directed to the University of Georgia Press, I had tried a well-known publisher that works in Atlanta, and that didn't work out very well at all. So I didn't know how many times I was going to be able to, how many shots I'd have at this. So I did whatever I was told. It was 3.5 years, and it was a year late being printed in production.
Hey, that's all the questions I have. Hopefully I've left a little space for anybody else to
I'm
ask.
sorry, I sounded like I was hurrying, but I was at the beginning. Questions?
Yes, hi. My name is Melanie. Listen, I loved that you did that in black and white because I've traveled through that area and it does lend itself to black and white. I'm curious about two things. When you got up to Crystal River, did you end up swimming with the manatees? Did they come up to your boat and such?
I was shooting the next town down, the Chaswitzka, but no, but I didn't swim with them, but the last time I was there, there are always manatees in those creeks, and you usually don't know it until you hear them exhale. You're standing somewhere and you hear this, and then an inhale, and oh, right. Yeah.
Yes.
That's the locals.
And did you end up kayaking through Caladesi Island?
Oh, I misspent a lot of my youth on Caladesi Island. I know it well, but it changes constantly. It's a barrier island, so it's evolving. I was just there last month. I'm from Clearwater, so.
Yes, that's why I mentioned it.
Yeah.
And if you are interested in working with people about the aquifers, there is an artist who is a conservationist, lives in the middle of the state, and this is from his generation. Before that, they've been working on that. His name is Johnny Dane.
Okay. Thank you.
Look him up. He might be able to direct you in something that you want done.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay. That's not Lisa, but Lisa's profile has a hand up.
Thank you. Jim Stacy, Benjamin, I love the photographs that I saw, and I gather that many of them were done in film. Can you just briefly, this is a geeky question, but can you talk about how you obtained the sort of continuity of tone from black to white, which I always found difficult in film, but you seem to have? Was that in producing the print, or was it done in production somewhere?
You're right. The entire project was shot on film. Early on, there was 35 millimeter that I was using, and those are the basis for some of the before and after side by sides. But most all of it is shot on medium format, and I have been shooting black and white film since 1970, and it's second nature to me. The only difference for me was that I needed to scan or get scans done if I couldn't get a good one of the negatives, and prepare them for the printing process. And that seems to have worked out pretty well. I've been happy with how my scans or the scans of my images reproduced. It's a leap. It's one of the reasons why I like to see exhibits of work, but something that Polly almost asked is people things, the work is hard to look at. People said to me repeatedly, this should be a book. When I would go to portfolio reviews like Photolucida, and I would have people I respect in this business say to me, really great work, but this should be a book. Or someone at a museum say, I can't show this, this should be a book. So there is a difference between preparing for an exhibit, which I've done at Michael's gallery here in Greenville, and preparing work for reproduction. And I'm happy with the way it looks, but it's not perfect. It's almost never perfect. I would love to have been on press, but I wasn't invited.
We have
Thank
a
you.
question from Kathleen. You're on mute, I believe.
No, I'm Don. I'm Kathleen's husband. So I have a question. I hope I can verbalize it. So you have these before and after pictures. Was there some sort of challenge in composing the after pictures which portray something unpleasant aesthetically, if you follow me?
I did my best to get in the right place. It was, as I was explaining, not easy to drag my tripod or hold the camera in as close as I could. I just wanted to get it in the frame, or so that they would aesthetically look. I don't want to say they have this. You can't predict what the light's going to be like. I can't. I did have to. One of the things I had to do was bring all these old 35mm lenses with me to the swamp, as I can't tell what lens I used in 1983 to take that shot that I'm trying to redo now. So I would stand there and put a 28mm lens. I said, no, it must have been the 35. No, it must have been the 50. And to make sure to bring all those lenses from Asheville down to Florida and out in the canoe that day, which meant 2 dry boxes at my feet with all of these, a bag of 35mm gear for this purpose and the medium format gear to take the other photographs. So it was difficult technically, as well as difficult to stand in the same place and see how ruined it was.
Well, it's a great project, and I hope it gets the attention it deserves.
That's why I'm suffering through.
Yeah.
We'll be suffering through a lot of publicity.
I have one other question. I don't want to hog the show, though. Can I ask it?
Shoot.
All right. So I'm kind of curious to know, I think you said that there were the people who are living there locally, not the ones in the McMansions, if that's what they're building, but people who've lived there for generations. Are there such people, and what has the impact of all this change been on their lives?
Out where I'm shooting, there isn't anyone that lives there year round, because for example, the Hurricane Idalia, which was this past fall, I think, late fall, it landed at Cedar Key. That is a huge storm surge. You can build a cabin out there, but you're going to have to assume everything's going to get flooded or so. So where I'm actually shooting, anyone who has a cabin there expects anything that's in that cabin is junk. Their wife probably told them, you take that up to where you go drink in the swamp. I don't want, not happening here. But there are nice homes, but they're further inland, or they're on higher ground, like at Crystal River. I believe they're very nice homes in my suburbs there. I haven't been. But there are a lot of people who live further inland that enjoy going to the swamp that are safe.
Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Honeger, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, I would. Thank you. Benjamin, if I were to go to this swamp today, I mean, what intrigues me about your photos and what frustrates me is the devastation's obvious when you can do the comparison between the two photos. But if I were to go there now, and some of your photos are of now and look very beautiful, would I think it? I mean, when I have no means to compare, how would it look to me? Am I getting the point across?
I think I understand what you're asking me. I kind of hurried through some of the photographs, but toward the end, there were photographs of dead trees, and more dead trees. They are an indicator that the water is getting salty. It's rising and getting saltier and saltier. The aquifer is full of salt water now. What used to be clear baby blue water, like the Crystal River or the other spring-fed creeks, is now brown. It's brackish from the water having gotten into the aquifer because it was pulled out. Because at the other end, the water was pulled out for the villages and bottled water companies and that sort of thing. But you would see a wasteland, like the images that were the new photograph in the pairings. And you would see there are very few standing living trees. There's some standing dead trees that haven't collapsed yet, but you might get the idea if you were to go up that creek. I focused on one little area, a couple of square miles. And there are people who could go to Chassahowitzka or go to Crystal River and just not look past the seawall and not know this was happening. But if you get in a boat and go out closer to the Gulf, you would see this. And that's another reason why I continue to do the photography, because it's not visible and people don't know it's happening.
Well, congratulations. I think you're doing great work, and even promoting it. I know it's difficult, but you're doing the right thing. So.
And I will say I'm happy to hear that Aline Smithson was involved in your work. I almost saw her fingerprints there, but not quite. She gave me some wonderful advice over the years, some of which I took, some of which I didn't.
Yeah, she's a lovely human being. Yeah. Thanks.
Benjamin, do you want to tell us where we can get your book?
My book can be purchased through the University of Georgia Press. And
did you show the cover? The cover of it?
Sorry, I had my copy open to one of the. Well, let me go ahead and really pimp it. There are two of these. I don't know if, yeah, you can see that.
Yeah, right.
These are gatefolds. They're fold out. It's a four images in the same place taken over time. And this was my idea when I asked the press if they would do this. There are two of them in here. They said, sure. I thought, great. This is the book. It's a coffee table book. It's like 12 inches square and it's thick. I think 85 photographs. 4 contributors. University of Georgia Press is easy to find online. And there's a little search box at the top, and you put my name in there, Benjamin Dimmitt, or An Unflinching Look, and you'll find it, and they'll ship it to you. And it's they have good grant writers there. It's not expensive. I think it's $35 $7. So that's incentive.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? No? Okay.
Okay, I think we'll wrap it up there for today. Thank you, Benjamin and Polly and Michael. It's been a great day. Lots of interesting stories. Get a chance next month on February 17. We've got Jane Ivory talking about duress and Bob Newman's Shadows of Emmett Till. So hopefully we'll see you next month. Thanks for all of you for stopping in.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Michael, for
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Yeah, we thank you.
Bye, Mike.
Bye, Michael.
Thanks, Polly.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. It's good to see you.
Hello, Melanie.
Hey. Hope it's not too cold there.
It's worse than it is there.
Yeah. And the
Okay.
rest will show up on Sunday, I hear.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. I'll say
All
goodbye.
righty. Yep.
Good to see you.
Say hi to all.
I will.